Okay, I think we are live. It says live on my Zoom.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second annual Black Kids White Coats match series. It feels crazy saying that second annual. Last year, series was amazing. We had an awesome group of newly matched residents, doctors. This year, we also have an amazing group. Today, we'll kick things off with Ob Gyn, and we have three wonderful, wonderful newly matched ladies, newly minted Ob Gyn docs, and go ahead and start with a quick introduction. We have Ms. Buki Akingbola. She is hailing from Tennessee at Louisiana. I'm sorry, from New Orleans at DCOM, and she'll be going to University of Minnesota. We have Ms. Karen Opara, who hails from Keck School of Medicine at USC, and she'll be going to UT Houston. And then we also have, last but not least, Ms. Claire Dorsent, and she's from Philadelphia College of Medicine, the Georgia campus, and will be going to Mayo Clinic in Rochester. So look forward to an amazing discussion with everyone.
I was about to say, Nelson, you better put doctor on in front of them
I know,
names now. You know what I'm saying?
I
Put
make
some
sure,
respect.
I make sure to put a blanket doctor in front of everyone. But yes, everyone is a doctor, and they worked extremely hard for that title. So,
Yay. Yeah, I'm Lily again. As you guys know from the channel, it's so great to have all of you guys here. And thank you, Nelson, for the introductions. We're gonna go straight like into it. We usually try and like break it down according to like the years in medical school. So we want to have like a brief kind of conversation about how you guys got into OB-GYN, like when were you first introduced to it along your journey? What have you seen to like proven to be helpful to you guys? Maybe like earlier on in your medical journey, and anyone can start.
I'll go ahead and start. I feel like my story about that is really not super interesting. I was that person who first year of medical school said that I wanted to go into OBGYN. On the very first day of orientation, our schools had us write letters to our fourth year selves and then gave them to us. And literally my letter, it's like, maybe we'll be an OBGYN at the end of this. And here we are. I definitely told myself in like second, third year to be open to things. And I think there was definitely a few things that almost swayed me away from OB/GYN. Peds was one of them, and surgery. I love surgery, but I think once I did my OB/GYN rotation and I did a few more in fourth year, it just further confirmed that, oh yeah, this is all I want to do. And a preceptor once told me that you find your specialty when you feel like you've found your people. And I really feel like I found my people, both in the big group me that I'm in with all the other Black OB/GYN applicants, or also just as I'm in the hospital talking to other OB/GYN docs and stuff. So found my people. That's how I got to OB.
awesome. Anybody else?
I can go next. Hi everyone again. My name is Karen from Keck School of Medicine. So for me, I think my interest in OB/GYN really started actually before med school. In high school, I really loved my anatomy and physiology classes. I actually remember, I don't know if you guys remember like that video they make you watch in high school, The Miracle of Life, but like I remember watching it and I was just like, oh my God, like whatever doctor deals with that, like I want to be that doctor. And then, later on I learned that that was an OB/GYN. So a lot like Buki, I came into med school knowing that I wanted to do women's health. And I was actually kind of debating between OB/GYN and family medicine. I rotated through my OB/GYN rotation. I loved it. I really felt like, OB/GYN was a specialty that really brought together a lot of my interests in terms of women's health, but also advocacy. I feel like OB/GYN is one of those unique specialties where you really get to, advocate for your patients and really fight for your patients. I think that's something that's really special to OB/GYN. And then later on, when I rotated through family medicine, I just felt like I wasn't able to do a lot of the things that I really enjoyed in OB/GYN, like being in the OR, I also quickly realized that I don't really like to work with kids. So that really kind of canceled family medicine for me. And so, yeah, that's kind of my path to OBGYN, what ultimately led me to applying to the field.
So my journey is very similar to Karen's in that I kind of knew that I wanted to be an OBGYN prior to medical school. So I went to a magnet middle school and high school, and so they had medical like programs, and so I would like wear scrubs and rotate through hospitals and stuff. And so during my junior year, we got the opportunity to do an internship, and originally I always thought I wanted to be a pediatrician growing up, but they didn't have a pediatrician available. So the next closest thing to working with like infants and kids was being on the labor and delivery unit. So I did that and I just fell in love with it. So all throughout undergrad, I knew I wanted to do OBGYN. I came into medical school like, I'm going to do OBGYN. But then in second year, I started keeping an open mind because I was just like, you know, I want a good lifestyle and there are other things outside of medicine that I'm interested in. And so I was like, let's explore options. And I used to be a medical scribe. So like emergency medicine was top of the list. I also liked urology. And I ended up liking surgery a lot more than I thought during my surgery rotation. So I was kind of like, well, let's see how this goes. But ultimately, like you said, when I did my OBGYN, I found my people. I was excited to get up every morning and go to my rotation. I wasn't looking at my watch, counting down the minutes to leave the rotation. And so I knew that that was the right specialty for me.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you all so much for sharing that. And kind of springing into the next question. So mentorship is a huge part of all of us achieving things we've achieved so far. So I want to ask you all, what does mentorship mean to you guys? How did you find your mentors? And what was the role of your mentors all throughout medical school? Anybody can start.
I'll start. So excellent question. I am very personally big on mentorship. It's part of why I do my best to mentor whoever I can with however much extra free time that I can. I actually found my mentor through SNMA. I went to the University of St. Thomas for undergrad, and we did not have a MAPS chapter when I was there. I do believe they have now, which is great, but we did not have a MAPS chapter. And when I was doing my master's year, I did a master's year at Lincoln Memorial University in anatomy, basically. I was like, I really want to get connected to SNMA, MAPS. So I saw that there was an opening to apply for the National Future Leadership Program. And I applied, and my now mentor was the director of the program at the time. And so throughout the program, we just interacted. I was a fellow in the program. She was the director. But towards the end, she was like, I reached out to her. I said, I really need official sort of guidance in medicine. I'm the first in my family to go into medicine. And I just sent her this really heartfelt email. And I was just like, I would really appreciate any guidance, assistance, or help that you may be able to offer me throughout this process. And she was like, let's get on the phone and talk. So we had a very long conversation. And that was literally the beginning of what is now not only a great mentor-mentee relationship, but also truly now kind of morphed into a friendship. So throughout medical school, my mentor, she served a number of different purposes. She checked in to make sure I was passing my classes. If I was struggling at all, she would help me with that. When AMEC kind of came up every year, she would help me navigate how to get funding, who I should ask at my school to get funding to attend the conference, that type of thing. Sometimes she wrote letters of support on my behalf to my dean of students to make sure that I went to the conferences. And my mentor is a pediatrician. She is an academic pediatrician. She's actually at Penn. But as fourth year came up, and I think she was very sad when I chose OBGYN over pediatrics. But when fourth year came up, she literally connected me to her roommate from medical school, who happens to be an OBGYN program director. So she literally, when I say that in my life, she went kind of above and beyond to just really help me, both professionally and in some respects kind of personally as well. I think she did a lot of really guiding me through professional email communication, conducting yourself in a business meeting, that type of thing as well. So both those hard and soft skills. And so throughout the whole 4th-year residency application process, I think she was also really my ear and my support. And I often say that she believed in me more than I believed in myself, to be perfectly honest. And it was just so great to have this one person who had been consistent for me throughout this kind of 5-year period of my life, who has seen me from where I started to where I am now. It was just such a big blessing. So I'm very big on having a mentor, especially if you can find one. I will say, I think I was very lucky in having one long-term mentor, but I do really also believe in kind of short-term or situational mentors as well. The person my mentor connected me with, the one who was the OB-GYN program director, I corresponded back and forth with her probably about 3 or 4 times. She helped me read my personal statement, gave me some guidance on stuff like that. I would consider her as well kind of a mentor of sorts. So I always like to tell people to keep that in mind. Mentorship, yes, can definitely be long-term, but also can be situational or short-term as well.
So to follow, first of all, that's amazing and very inspiring that you were able to have that. So I feel like mentorship is everything to me. And I think I've always been passionate about mentoring, and I try to help others. But I also feel like I've also very struggled to find my own mentors. And so I've had more situational or short-term mentors. And I feel like, like Bucky said, like they serve their purposes. And so specifically for applying for OBGYN, I tried to start early, and I would reach out to like alumni and kind of get advice and kind of keep in touch with them. And then I found a couple of mentors through the ACOG City Mentor Program, which is through the ACOG website. And it's free for medical students. So you sign up through ACOG, and then you can go there and you kind of put in your interests and things that you're interested in. And I was able to connect to one resident and one attending, both who were affiliated with like various residency programs and went outside of their networks to connect me with other people who they thought would be beneficial to me during my process of applying. And then, like the OBGYN club at my school had guest speakers. So I reached out to her, and she was kind of more of a long-term mentor for me, but it was for about a year or so. So like I reached out to her before the process started, and kind of kept in touch with her, and, had her look over my personal statement and stuff. So I've had different mentors, but I haven't had like a long mentor like Bucky had, but each one of my mentors served their purposes. And I would say that it's good to have more than one person. And even more recently, in the middle of my process, I found someone, a fellow who I connected with, and she did mock interviews with me and stuff. So I think it's really important to just find those people who are willing to, like, even if it's just, short term, that they're there to kind of help guide you along the process and give you any wisdom and knowledge and information that can be of benefit to you.
So I definitely echo everything that Becky and Claire just said. I'm a firm believer that I don't think I would have gotten to where I am without my mentors. When I started medical school, my first year of medicine, I wasn't really sure how to go about finding mentors. But my second year of medical school, I feel very blessed to have met the mentor that I have now. I actually met her through this Diversity and Inclusion Week that our SMA chapter put on. And she was a OBGYN PGY4 at the time. And she came and did a talk on implicit bias in OBGYN. And, before going to the talk, this is something that I've always been interested in, just, implicit bias and racial bias in OBGYN, and also Black maternal mortality. And so I remember meeting up with her after her talk and telling her that these were some of my interests and that I'd love to, sometimes shadow her and have further conversations with her. And that's kind of how our mentorship relationship began. And so during my second year of medical school, I did a lot of shadowing with her, as well as another Black OBGYN PGY4 in the program. And then towards the end of my second year, I was able to develop research projects with her. And I really feel like a mentor, not only do they serve as someone who gives you advice, but also someone who can kind of give you the space to, develop your interests and also set goals and give you resources to achieve those goals. I actually remember at the end of my second year coming to my mentor, who at the time, she had just finished her PGY 4-year and was coming on as an attending at our program. And I told her, hey, you know, like, I'm really interested in maternal mortality. I think it would be really cool to kind of like look into maternal mortality at our own institution. And she essentially was like, yes, that would be awesome. Basically, you know, set up a research team and put together resources where we could develop it into a project. And it's actually been a project we've been working on for the past 2 years. And so I really feel, I'm really grateful that I've had her as a mentor, and I've had her as someone who has, you know, been in my corner and has been able to really give me the space to, you know, start to develop what my research interests are, and then give me the resources to really pursue those research interests. She's also been someone who has helped me during the ERAS cycle, has given me kind of like tips on developing my program list, and, you know, which programs are more diversity friendly and which ones I may not want to put on my list. I actually remember when we had kind of like a mock interview at my program, and she was one of my interviewers. And I remember, like, at the end of the interview with her, she kind of like, you know, she went from like interviewer mode to like mentor mode. And she was like, hey, just to let you know, like, the other interviewers really like you. And that was like really special, or really nice for me to hear from her, just to know that, like, you know, even in that space, like, she still was someone who had my back and was going to support me. So yeah, I really feel like mentorship is important, and it's really important to find those people that are going to support you, that are going to foster your interests, help you develop those interests, and really give you the space to pursue your goals.
Well, thank you guys so much for that. It's obviously, yeah, mentorship is major key. So for those, anywhere, any point that you are along the pathway, like, make sure you're reaching out to people and, you know, asking for the guidance, because you can't, it's really hard to do it alone, I think, is kind of what I've gotten from what you all have said. Kind of moving along with the conversation, let's reflect on medical school. Like, how's it been? Highs and lows. You can be as open or as not open as you would like. But I feel like the lows are always interesting to listen to, just because I feel like, you know, we're done, we're here. So, like, we clearly got through it. So that's always inspiring. Right. And yeah, if you guys can just talk about that, if you would like, however you feel like you want to start.
I'll go ahead and start. This is something I feel like I could talk about forever. Like, truly, this could be its own session. I think I will start with the highs. I think one of my biggest highs of medical school is literally meeting some of my best friends. You know, it's a struggle that we all kind of went through together, and we all had some pretty significant / impactful things that happened during medical school. And at our med school during 3rd and 4th year for clinical rotations, we're sent all over the country to different rotation sites. So we very literally, like, don't see one another anymore. And my 2 best friends in particular, they went to the same site together, and I went to a different one, and I was, you know, very sad about it, but we maintained being friends throughout 2nd and 3rd year, or 3rd and 4th year. One of my best friends was literally just here this past weekend for my graduation party. Like, so they're literally, one was in my wedding, my friends for a lifetime. And I'm just very grateful to have really good friends, especially, you know, as an adult, it can be a little bit harder to make really good friends. So I will always say that's one of my highs of medical school. I think another big high of medical school is really kind of coming to my own a little bit more, and kind of figuring out, like, what it is I really want, and who, you know, the type of person that I want to be is. I would say I'm a pretty strong personality. I'm very, very blunt. I think growing up, sometimes people would be like, oh, you should be more gentle, or more, or not as blunt, or not as honest. But that's a trait, a quality of myself I really like. I think throughout medical school, I learned a lot more tact as it came with some of those things. But just this weekend, when I was reflecting over the last 4 years, I was like, wow, you know, first year Buki to Buki today, graduated Buki, are 2 completely different, not completely different, just, you know, more matured, older, wiser people. As far as lows, I think, like I said, we could literally be sitting here all day. One thing that I really wish that I had done a better job of when I was applying to medical school, so way back when, I can't remember if I've mentioned this or not, but I'm the first in my family to go into medicine. I am Nigerian, but my parents were not the ones who are like doctor, lawyer, engineer. They literally were just like, do something that's going to make you money, really. They just didn't want us to have to struggle in whatever that is. And they're like, if your interest is medicine, great. If it's something else, even better. Two of my siblings work for Fortune 500 companies. So, but for me, it was medicine. I loved it. I didn't necessarily feel pushed or pressured by my parents to go into medicine. However, I think it's hard. I think for those who are listening or any of my fellow panelists who are first generation in medicine, it's very, very tough. There's a lot to the medical school process that I was completely unaware of when I was applying to medical school. I thought, oh, I just needed to apply and get in. I really wish I had done a better job of kind of researching the medical schools that I applied to. I kind of went to the first one that accepted me. And I think as I think about my interests in medicine, I think I probably would have tried to target a school that had a bit more robust research department, because I really like research, and had maybe the ability for some more opportunities. I'll just kind of leave it at that. I think so that was tough. I think it was tough finding out that I really, really loved something and it was difficult to accomplish at my medical school. And I think in hindsight, I just kind of wish I had done more research in the medical schools I had applied to. But, I'm very big on trying to forgive yourself for mistakes of the past, especially mistakes that you were completely unaware of. I think another hard part about medical school was, I think for most of us, just the studying and kind of getting through it. I had no idea what it was going to be and what it was really going to take. I'd always heard, of course, it was going to be hard. It's going to require a lot of hard work. But, I'd done undergrad. I was a neuroscience major in undergrad. So I was like, oh, I got this. I can do it. I mean, and clearly I did do it. But it was tough. I think whether it was just the didactic years and study for exams or board studying, Buki during board study period of life is just, not the funnest sometimes. And it was tough, figuring out what resources to use, how to access those resources. And not only am I like kind of first gen in med, I'm also the second oldest of 5 kids in my family. And I think as much as my parents wanted to, and I know for sure if they would have had it, I wasn't able to fully kind of financially really lean on them. So when my classmates are buying $300 to $400 to $500 board study or class studying resources, that was just like not something I was able to do. So, I'm always big on you do what you have to do, right? And so what I would do is I would ask to share resources. I would ask to split resources financially with a friend or somebody in my study group, that type of thing. So that was, it was tough, but clearly, we made it through. And I think the last thing that was kind of tough for me was being a Black student in medical school. In my particular class, and the class I entered with, I was one of 8, and we started with 247. We have pretty big classes. So yes, we graduated with 190 something. So that's a different story. But I was one of 8 Black people. And I think, many of us, especially my fellow panelists here, we can all understand a little bit why and how that can be tough. I think one of the hardest things is just making sure that you advocate for yourself. One thing that I like to tell people when I'm mentoring or talking to like first or second years is that you are your own biggest advocate. I credit a lot of why I'm here today because I advocated for myself, very literally, to the dean of students, to our executive vice dean, to whoever it is that I needed to, if I needed something or needed some type of resource. And I just highly recommend that. That's my biggest piece of advice in medicine and in medical school, is that you are your own best advocate, and nobody will advocate harder for you than you will for yourself. So I'll kind of leave it there. I know that's kind of general. If I get too specific, it's kind of game over, and I don't want to monopolize all the time here. But yeah, those are kind of my general highs and some general lows.
Awesome, thank you.
I can go next. I'll start off with the highs. So I didn't mention this earlier, but I actually am a dancer. I love to dance on my free time. And one of my highest points has been dancing in medical school. I was part of like the dance team in med school. I know it's crazy I had the time to do that, but I feel like you make time for the things that are important to you. So I did that in med school. I remember my first year of medical school, actually, I got together 7 other Black women at our school, and we put together like an Afrobeats dance, and it was like the finale of our talent show, and it was so cool. Like that was definitely like probably like one of the highest moments of medical school for me. And then I would say I think like the friends that I've made in medical school, I definitely am leaving medical school with people who I would consider to be lifelong friends, and that I know that I will still be in relationship with them years from now. So I'm really grateful for that. Now the lows, I would say, so I wouldn't consider myself like the strongest academic student. Like I was not part of AOA. I did not get any academic honors. And honestly, I not the best test taker. So I would say that in terms of like taking like block exams and shelf exams, that was something that I really struggled with. Actually, my first year of medical school, I ended up failing my first block exam. And then later on, when it came time for step 1 studying, that was really a struggle for me, just because, again, I wasn't the best test taker. And studying for step 1 and having to spend hours of a day, alone in your apartment or in the library or whatever, was really just lonely and isolating. And there were definitely many times during my dedicated time where I really felt like, maybe I'm not cut out for medicine. Maybe I don't have what it takes to do this. I ended up having to delay my 3rd year of medical school just so I could have more time to study, because I wasn't, when my other classmates were starting their 3rd year of medical school, I still wasn't passing my practice tests. And so it was a really discouraging time for me. But I would say that the things that really kind of helped me get through those low points, I think definitely leaning on my family. Similar to Bucky, I am Nigerian as well, and I'm the first doctor in my family. And so because of that, I never had anyone else in my family to kind of guide me through, that journey of medicine. And so a lot of my classmates had parents who are doctors or relatives who are doctors, and they could really lean on them. And so I didn't have that. I actually remember when I came into med school, like my first year, everyone was talking about like, oh, like when are you going to start prepping for step 1? And I was like, I have no idea what step 1 is. So yeah, I really came in just like clueless. But I would say even despite all that, my parents have been my biggest cheerleaders. And even though, they're not in medicine, and a lot of times, I would like complain to them about the rigors of med school, and they'd be kind of like, oh, like, we don't understand, but like, we're here for you. And that was really reassuring for me. During my step 1 study time, I really leaned on them. Also, I continued to do things that I loved. As I mentioned, I'm a dancer, and so I continue to do that. And that really is a great way for me to like relieve stress and just build my overall wellness. And then I also, during my 2nd and 3rd year of medical school, I was going to therapy. And I'm a firm believer that everyone needs therapy. Like, you don't need to be in a mental crisis to be in therapy. I think everyone can benefit from it. And that being able to do that my 2nd and 3rd year was so good for just my own like mental health and well-being. And then also just remind yourself of your strengths. Like, as I mentioned, I'm not the best test taker, but what I do know is that like, I'm great with people. I love working with people. And I think it's important to remember that, at the end of the day, your patients are not going to ask you what you got on step 1. what they're going to remember is how you treated them, whether you cared for them. And even though, I didn't do the best on my exams, one thing I always knew was that I always got great clinical evaluations. And I remember at the end of third year when I got my MSPE and kind of looking through my MSPE, I remember just being so shocked that these people had great things to say about me. And, it was just like a great reminder that like, okay, you know what, like I may not have the numbers, but like I have the qualities of a great physician. And I think remembering your strengths really will help you get through those low points.
So I'll follow. I think some of my highs of medical school were some of the professional relationships that I developed with some of my professors and others. And I do have a couple of lifelong friends as well that I made in medical school. And one of the biggest ones was kind of stepping into who I am now. I think coming from PWI, that was a larger school, I always felt like just another number. Like I didn't really find my purpose or place. I think in medical school, I went to a campus where it was a lot smaller and our class was about 150 students. And so I got opportunities to to experience some of the things that I truly enjoyed, which is like medical education and like starting a summer camp program for underrepresented minority students, and then taking an additional year to like enhance my teaching skills, because those are the things that really matter to me. And I think all of those experiences and a lot of the fun that I had with some of my classmates really made medicine, my medical journey experience, like really worth it. But a lot of the lows that I had to was I think one thing that I felt like I was lacking in my experience was that tribe or like support system. And I think it's because of my status. So I'm actually a fifth year medical student. I ended up doing an additional year. So I didn't graduate with my original classmates. And so I was kind of like in this limbo space in that time. And so I felt like the people who I had connected with kind of moved on to the other phase of their journey. And then the people who I was joining, they were in their own phase. And so I kind of felt kind of out of place. And I didn't necessarily feel like I had the tribe or support system that a lot of other people had. And so that made it hard because there were people or friends who, I thought we were going to go through this entire journey together, and it just ended up not being that way. And as unfortunate as it is, it happens. But, again, like people are there for situations and short terms, and you make the best of those relationships and then you keep pushing. And so I think that was kind of a big low for me. And then honestly, I think another thing for me was not being able to have experiences like research experiences and such coming from a smaller DO school. I just felt like at the time it was hard to prioritize and kind of like really seek out research opportunities. And then even if I did, there weren't many available. So I thought that was one of my weaknesses in terms of my applications, was not having research. And I thought that it would hurt me. And it actually I don't think it ended up making a difference. But in hindsight, I did feel like, I wish there were more opportunities available. And then as far as that goes too, some of my clinical experiences. So like during third and fourth year, we're split up and we're going all over the US for different rotation sites. And I ended up happening to stay in Atlanta. And so it was harder to get some of the inpatient experiences that some of like many other medical students get. And so I have a lot more of like outpatient experiences. And I don't know that it's going to make a big difference, because I think when you start residency, everybody says like you start off like they don't expect you to know anything, because every program has a different curriculum and different experiences and different rotations. But I just felt like I was missing some of those clinical experiences that I would hear some of my counterparts speaking about. And so I did feel like I had to work a little bit harder to like learn how to like write notes and round on patients and stuff, because a lot of the outpatient experiences don't give you those practices. So those were just some of the lows when I think back on my experience.
Wow. Thank you all so much for sharing. I mean, I know tons of folks watching now can relate to at least one, if not majority of those that you all showed. And you all showed such tact and resilience in overcoming those, the lows. So I appreciate you all sharing. And I also definitely always appreciate the highs as well. So just kind of next question, we're kind of going towards residency. You all are the residents now. But overall, how did you all get exposure to your field? Ob Gyn, obviously, how did you all get exposure that kind of took you towards this route?
That's a great question. I think I mentioned earlier on when I answered the why Ob Gyn question, but I had always thought in first and second year that I wanted to do Ob Gyn, or that I would be interested in it as a specialty. I definitely think in first and second year I wasn't fully aware of everything that OBGYN encompassed, and then once I started my rotations, I was like, oh, I love this. So I think my biggest exposure, well, I was part of the Women's Health Club during first and second year, and we did a lot of women's health kind of focused events and that kind of thing. But when it comes to the actual specialty itself, I would say for me, it really started third year when I had my very first OBGYN rotation. On that rotation, I actually worked with an OB hospitalist, which I think I personally thought it was a great experience, because with the hospitalist, she just takes whatever cases kind of come in, surgical, babies, C-sections, whatever it is, whatever that kind of comes through the door. So I got to see a wide variety of the specialty during that 4-week period of time. In my fourth year in the summer, leading into my fourth year, I did another OBGYN rotation at Audition Medical Center in New Orleans. And it was kind of more what you would think of the standard OB rotation, where my OB was, she was on call, she had clinic days Monday through Friday, and then also, had deliveries that were scheduled throughout the day sometimes in clinic, and then also later on at night. So I think that those two experiences combined really just for me further cemented that this was the right specialty for me. I think one thing that I tell people honestly is that I could sit and watch Toco strips go by for hours and not get bored, because there's always something interesting. That's the strips that are monitoring the baby's progress in moms who are in labor, or sometimes not in labor, but just needing to monitor the baby for whatever reason. I just don't get bored. Babies are always doing something in there, and it's fun. It's fun to watch. I also think I really liked the variety of it. As I mentioned in that last rotation that I did in New Orleans, we would be in the middle of clinic, and we would start inductions pretty early in the morning. We would have the moms come in at 3 a.m., 4 a.m. to start inductions. And sometimes, especially if it wasn't baby number one, before we knew it, we'd be in clinic 10 a.m. and be getting pages that the baby is coming. So we'd have to, thankfully all the patients were pretty understanding, especially coming into an OBGYN clinic. So we'd have to head over and very literally run over to deliver a baby. And then it's like, okay, great. Delivery went well. We ran back and saw another, set of patients in clinic, and every single minute I enjoyed. I just thought it was fun. Even on my interviews, when they would ask me why OB, in part, my answer was because it's fun. It's just, I go to work every day and it's fun. It's interesting. It's challenging. And I think all of my experiences put together really is what cemented this as the specialty for me.
Great. Anybody else?
I echo what Becky said. So I did have some, pre-medical experience, watching C-sections and deliveries. And, I kind of fell in love with it, and I was like, oh, this is awesome. They get to do so much. It's a variety. You literally go to work and it's never going to be the same day to day. And that was a big thing in choosing the specialty for me, was because some of the other specialties that I was interested in, I didn't love the bread and butter, the everyday day-to-day stuff. It was just kind of this is getting a little boring, versus with OBGYN, I never felt bored, never felt like I was doing the same thing, even though each woman goes through the same delivery process. Every birthing experience is a different experience, So I did my first OBGYN rotation in third year. And even my repo, like we had our department chair who came and taught it. And when she was teaching it, she made it fun. It was exciting. We had like some clinical skills and things like that. It was just amazing. And then I did my third year rotation, and it was more so observing, because the OBGYN that I was working with, like her patients absolutely love her. They adore her. And so it's kind of hard to be like, hey, I'm going to let the medical student deliver. But she taught me so well, and I got to see so much and learn so much. And so I didn't get my hands dirty until about auditions. And so I got to deliver my first baby. And again, it was just like the same thing. It was like never a dull moment. I was still just as excited with every procedure, every patient that we saw. And so it was kind of like, yeah, this is it. This is going to be what I want to do. And then when I ended up doing my audition rotation at the program that I matched at, actually, I was placed on Gyn-Onc, and I was actually terrified, and I didn't want to do it. And I was just like, I don't know if I want to go, because I felt like my surgical skills were a little bit lacking. And so I was really nervous, but again, it was challenging. I got there, I was challenged, and I grew, and I learned, and I developed my skills in just the short 4 weeks that I was there. And I proved that I was worthy of being there, and they loved me. And I think that's why I ended up matching there. And I'm excited to go back and to learn and to be challenged some more and to grow and to become a good provider so that we can make a difference in our communities.
So for me, I think, so I low-key was kind of lazy my first year of medical school, so I didn't really get exposure to OBGYN until my second year. I mentioned that I met my mentor my second year of medical school, and so I was really able to just shadow both her and another resident when they were on L&D, and so that was kind of my first exposure to OBGYN. But I think my third year was really when I got to really get in there and really experience OBGYN. I rotated at a hospital in LA that is very OB heavy. So I really had the opportunity to deliver a couple babies myself my third year. And that was a lot of fun. I think I just really loved being able to, get my hands dirty and just really being involved in the delivery. We actually have, at the hospital that I rotated at, we actually have both the OB residents as well as emergency medicine residents rotate. And so I would love when the EM residents come on, because they just don't want to deliver babies. So that would mean that me as a student, like I get to participate a lot more. And then my fourth year was when I did my sub-I rotations. I did a sub-I rotation in family planning in July, and then I did an MFM rotation in October. I would say my family planning rotation was, I knew I was going into OBGYN, but that rotation really just solidified it for me. I really felt like I was working with, my people. The people in the family planning department, particularly at USC, are very passionate about reproductive justice. And I really felt like I was coming in and really doing something impactful and really, doing good for my patients every time I came in to my rotation. So I loved that. And then my MFM rotation was when I really got to feel like I was more so of a sub-intern, really being able to see patients on my own, doing ultrasounds and, interpreting fetal heart rate tracings. And, that's when I really felt like, okay, like I can do this, and I'm really enjoying what I'm doing. And I really felt that that passion to want to get involved. I think that's a great way to know that something is really for you, is if you really want to go out of your way to help out or to participate. There are definitely like other rotations in other specialties where I was like, oh, I don't really want to be here. But like on my OBGYN rotations, I was really like, hey, like, can I see that patient first? Like, do you mind if I do that ultrasound? Like, can I try doing biometries on this patient? Like, I really felt like I wanted to get involved. And so that was a great way for me to know that like, this was the specialty for me.
Awesome. Thank you all so much again. And, for a lot of folks, again, that's a very important question. People who might be between certain specialties or who need that extra push to kind of decide exactly what to go into. So kind of moving on as well, what do you recommend? Kind of Karen talked about a little bit about test prep here, but here's a twofer. How did you all prep for boards, whether it's step 1, step 2? And what do you recommend to students who are interested in Ob Gyn, but may have what's known as a suboptimal test score?
I can go since I guess I kind of alluded to this, but so I'll share my experiences just to let you know what not to do. So I think most of my classmates started prepping for step 1 like in their second year, like beginning of their second year of medical school. I really didn't start prepping for step 1 honestly until my dedicated time. And if I could do it over, I think I would. And I mean, I wouldn't start my hardcore studying in second year, but I would just like try and do some light review. So personally for me, what I did was we ended our last block, I think was April, was mid-April. And so we had until mid-April until mid-June to take step. And so I basically started in mid-April reading through first aid. And then like every week I would do UWorld questions, and then I would do like a practice NBME like every 2 weeks. If I could go back, I would really stress to students, to rather than focusing on reading through first aid, really focus on doing those practice questions, because step 1 and step 2, it's important to know the content, but I think it's more important to know how to take the test. And you're really not going to know how to take the test unless you do practice questions, and those practice questions will basically help you practice how to answer those questions. And so I would, advise students to, try and like read through first aid, get through first aid before you start your dedicated study time, and then really use your dedicated study time to go through UWorld questions and really focus on doing those practice questions and those practice tests, because especially if you're someone like me who struggles with taking tests, I think it's really important to really focus on how to take the test, because you'd be surprised how much of the material you actually know and you actually have retained over the past 2 years. And so you don't really, well, at least for me, I realized I didn't really need to do that much content review when it came to dedicated study time. I really just needed to focus on how do I answer these test questions. So yeah, that was just my experience.
So for me, and I imagine maybe the audience is potentially pretty wide here, but because I went to a DO school, I actually took 4 board exams because we have, for the DO specific boards, is COMLEX. We have COMLEX 1 and 2, and then there's also step 1 and 2. Not all DO students take all 4. I chose to for a number of different reasons. I think as I thought about where do I want to be as far as program, and then also specialty consideration sometimes plays into the decision to take both. But I knew I wanted to be at an academic program, as I kind of mentioned earlier on. I have found throughout medical school that research is something that I am very interested in, and that I wanted to have a good amount of support to do as a resident. So that was in part one of the big things. And also I had hoped, and my number one throughout the whole process was the University of Minnesota, which is where I'll be going. There are only 2 OBGYN programs in Minnesota, and it's Minnesota or Mayo. So I was like, if I want to really increase my chances of ending up back in the state of Minnesota, I want to take both. Just a caution for anyone out there who either is a DO student currently or is potentially thinking about DO school, when you go to apply, not just in OBGYN, but in any specialty, go to the program website, because some programs to this day still do not accept COMLEX. So that was something, as well as I was researching my programs, I I started like pretty early on in this process. I would say I probably really started looking at programs like second year, end of second year, which is really, really early. So definitely don't think, that that's the norm. I feel like that felt very earlier to me, but I realized pretty early on that a lot of the programs that I was potentially interested in applying to required steps. So just giving that background as to why I took 4 board exams. As far as prepping for them, I agree. Questions all day. I think if you are a first or second year or thinking about applying, one thing I personally did was I used first aid during first and second year, just along with my classes. I thought it just helped giving me a very condensed version of what I was learning. Definitely do not use that as your only study resource first and second year. But what I found helpful was then by the end of second year, when I went to go start studying for boards, I was already really familiar with that resource. I think, I had a couple friends who just picked up first aid at the beginning of our dedicated period. And, it's kind of hard to get used to the book and the way the book is laid out and all of these things when you're seeing it for the first time at the beginning of this really crunch time period of time that you have to study. We had so my class had an unusually long amount of time. My school for the past few years has been experimenting with what is the, best / most optimal amount of time to give students to study. So we had from May 3rd, so the beginning of May to July 19th. So we had a really, really long time. I do not recommend, if for whatever reason you're out of school that gives you that much time, I don't recommend using that much time. I think that there definitely comes a point in time, and I know everybody said this to me. I did not believe it, but I am now a big believer in it. There definitely comes a point in time in which you just have to take it. You'll never, ever, ever feel prepared. That's something my mentor told me. She's like, I pushed my test a couple times, and in hindsight, I wish I hadn't. I think I would have been fine when I took it versus pushing it back a week or two. So if you do have that much time, I don't recommend using that much time. I would say, personally, I think anywhere from 5 to 8 weeks should be more than enough time. Another big thing, especially if you're first or second year, particularly second years, I would recommend start picking up Pathoma as well. UFAPS is kind of an acronym that people use when talking about resources to study for boards. So U is for UWorld, F is for first aid, I can't remember.
I think the A is FA, first aid.
First aid, perfect. Thank you. P is for Pathoma, and then S is for sketchy. And that's another thing too, especially first and second years. I personally was a sketchy person. I am not paid by any of these companies to do anything, but I will say all day, I found sketchy to be really, really helpful, more so the memory hooks, that type of thing. To this day, I was talking to someone literally yesterday about Giardia, and I was like, oh yeah, and the sketchy, it has this and this, so I found it really helpful, both not only for the micro, but the farm. They actually now also have sketchy for rotations and stuff. And they have sketchy path as well. At the time I was studying, they had just rolled out sketchy path. So I didn't really utilize that, but I did utilize all of sketchy, micro, and farm, and found that to be incredibly helpful. So I highly recommend that. I thought that was kind of a perfect combination. Again, I will say, I think some of these resources are hard to just pick up for the very first time at the beginning of dedicated. So if you're in first or second year and you have the opportunity to slowly start integrating some of these things out in your studying, I would try to do that. I found it very helpful in first and second year. We had first year, we had farm. I used sketchy farm. We had micro first year as well. I used sketchy micro then, used it again second year because it always comes right back up, and and then use it during boards. So I kind of did content review in the beginning of my board study period time. I started out one day I had neuro, one day I had GI, another day I had palm, that type of thing. And then in my last 3 weeks of my studying, I just did straight questions every single day. I think one of the biggest things that was really, really helpful was that someone told me that what I did was every single Saturday I would simulate my test day. Literally down to what I was going to wear. I had Bose headphones that they kind of offer in the they don't have the Bose ones in the testing centers, but you know what I mean? Those big headphones that you can kind of put over your ears. I would wear those like I did on test day. So what I would do was I bought the practice tests online. They're $60 a piece, but I just, kind of wanted to get myself exposed to as many questions as possible. And I would do a practice test. And then after that practice test, I would do another 4 blocks of 40 questions on UWorld to give me what would simulate that full entire testing day. The testing days are long. They're very, very long. You can get very, very tired. And I think part of why all 4 of my exams went as well as they went was because by the time the exam came, I was used to it. So by block like 5, I was still tired. Do not get me wrong. It's very exhausting to kind of be mentally on for that long. I was still tired, but I had really built up kind of my stamina and endurance for the test day. So I think that's another really big piece of advice that I really want to give. And then there's this girl who's in our big Black OBGYN kind of group thread. Her name is Camila Evans. I believe she has a YouTube channel. I don't know what it is. Sorry, Camila, if you ever see this. I would shout it out if I did, but I don't. And she has this whole video on like using UWorld and using questions to study for boards. And if you Google that or find that, I found it really helpful. Literally do the questions, review everything, both right and wrong. If you got it right, review to make sure you got it right for the right reason, that your understanding of the question or the pathophysiology or the process was correct. I definitely have those questions I got right because I guessed, so always important to view the right ones, and then always definitely important to view the wrong ones as well. I had a UWorld diary of sorts. It was basically a Word document separated by section. So I had like cardio, heme, each one on a different page. And I would put in there the things that I often forgot, the things that I needed to go back and really study on. For whatever reason, heart failure was always a thing for me. I like always had to go back. I'm like, is this cardiogenic or distributive? Like all those things. So I had my little diary, and every night or every like 2 to 3 days, I would literally sit and read the whole thing. And that was actually like really helpful. I was surprised how helpful that was. So it was definitely worth the time and effort that I put in. So I used that for kind of step 1 and level 1. And then of course the OMM part of it as well. In level 1, if you're a DO student or applying to DO school, OMM is basically the osteopathic medicine component. I used Salaries. I think Online Med Ed also has like an OMM section. The guy who actually does the Online Med Ed OMM section graduated from my medical school. Fun facts. And I found that to be pretty helpful as well for studying for the OMM part of COMLEX level 1 and 2. I personally, and then also for COMLEX, use ComQuest. I found that to be very helpful to give me kind of a better idea of how the COMLEX questions were set up. I personally thought they were slightly different in thinking. But that's just me. I know some people say, just use UWorld and then study the OMM. I did not particularly find that advice helpful. I used ComQuest, studied the OMM, and then for STEP, I used UWorld and some of the other things like the FAPS component. And for STEP 2 and level 2, I used Online Med Ed. I just found that helpful to go through the videos, and then that and questions. I personally didn't have enough time to use anything else. I did have first aid for step 2. I didn't find that as particularly helpful as step 1 as the first aid for step 1 was for me. And I also used Step Up to Medicine. That is a book. I'm a book person. Sorry, the lights went out here. And I found that helpful as well. So those are some of the things that I did, and it worked out pretty well for me. I will say in our application year, COVID was a thing, obviously, of course. So by the time I went to apply, I had not yet taken step 2, and that was okay. I communicated to the program coordinators, and a lot of them said, because of COVID or for a number of different reasons, some programs had as a policy that they only required step 2 or level 2 by the time they go to rank you, which is in and around January, early February. So if anybody's in that particular situation, don't worry too much about that. It ended up being totally fine for me.
So I'm just going to echo back off what Bucky said. So I'm also a DO student. So I ended up taking 5 board exams because I ended up taking the PE because, again, I'm a 5th year student. So I took the PE before, but that's no longer a thing that you guys have to worry about. So I did take step 1 and step 2, as well as level 1 and level 2 COMLEX. And I took it because I knew that I wanted to go into OBGYN, and it was kind of a competitive field. In addition to all those resources that were mentioned, I highly suggest you do a lot of questions. UWorld is golden, especially for step one. But one thing that I did want to add to that is Boards and Beyond was really helpful for me, especially to go through first aid. So first aid was kind of a thing where I didn't feel like I could just read through it like some people could. And so I felt like watching the Boards and Beyond video with first aid really helped me. And again, I did try to do a first pass of first aid before my dedicated period. And again, biggest advice that I'd give you is to actually be realistic with yourself when you're setting up your study schedules, because you have to give yourself grace. There are days where you will fall behind. If you know you're going to be traveling to go back home, like during the holiday breaks, like be realistic. How much are you really going to study? Like give yourself time to catch up when you do fall behind. And I think that that was one of the biggest things for me. And I think that helped keep my anxiety levels like down, because I would schedule in like break days. Like I would always take a day off at least one day a week when studying and things like that. And Sketchy was golden for micro for me. I started doing the Sketchy like Path and Farms, but the videos were way too long for me. So that's another big thing that I recommend, is that you find whatever resources work for you and stick to it. Everybody's going to tell you what they're doing and how they, like how it's the best thing that they're doing. And it may work for them, but it may not work for you. So don't compare yourself to what your classmates are doing. Stay focused on yourself, find the resources that you feel are helpful for you and stick to those, because there is a such thing as resource overload, and that can make you feel overwhelmed and make you fall behind. One other resource that I found pretty helpful, especially in my dedicated as I got closer to my exam, was the Dirty USMLE videos. I watched those because I felt like, especially for like topics that I didn't feel comfortable with, I got to the point where it was kind of like, I've seen this so many times, I'm not going to learn it. Let me find this mnemonic to help me remember it for test day. And so that was really helpful. And then I kind of jumped on the bandwagon a little late, but I started listening to some of the Divine podcasts, like when I was doing my commutes. And I found that to be helpful, just because I felt like sometimes just listening to someone explain a concept was going to be a lot easier than trying to read it and things like that. And it was just reassurance and reaffirming and revisiting the topic as I was driving to and from rotations and such. So everything they said, I wholeheartedly agree with. Like, try to incorporate first aid in the beginning. I did not, but I did do a first pass before my dedicated. I ended up pushing my exam back. Both my COMLEX and my USMLEs, but my school has a deadline, so I ended up taking COMLEX and I ended up doing fine. And I felt like I probably could have taken both exams sooner than when I did, but you don't trust yourself. And no matter how much we tell you to trust yourself, you're not going to. You might still change your exams. Don't be hard on yourselves. Do what you feel is best for you. And again, back to what Bucky was saying, it's advocate for yourself. If you feel like you're getting to a point where your test score, your practice exams, you're not passing them and everything, like talk to somebody, reach out to someone, get the help that you need. Don't let anyone pressure you into like forcing you to take an exam when you don't feel ready for it. Advocate for yourself and do whatever it is that you have to do so that you can take the test and hopefully have to take it once. And if you end up having to retake the exam, like don't beat yourself up. There are several students who don't pass the exams the first time and they successfully match. You just have to, get back on the horse, get back to grinding and keep doing it. And remember, like at the end of the day that you are more than just your test scores. You are a whole package and everything that you have to offer will count.
Yeah, can
Wow.
I just can I like
Sure.
add something to
Absolutely.
that?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm like, so like I echo everything Claire said about like advocating for yourself, not taking it yet when you're not ready. Like I mentioned, I delayed my third year because I had to push back my tests, and I think that was the best decision I could have made. And I'm glad that I had people who supported that decision for me. I actually remember before making that decision, I actually spoke with our Dean of Student Affairs over the phone, and I told her like, hey, like I really feel like I'm kind of like a failure for having to delay my third year. And it was really helpful for me that I was able to talk to her on the phone, and she was able to reassure me that you may be delaying your third year, but you're still going to start third year. And this is the best decision for you to have to push back your test because you don't want to have to take this test when you're not ready yet. And then I think it was also mentioned earlier about you being a whole package. Like, even if you don't do so well on the STEP exam, remember that there are still other components of your application that you can highlight. I ended up getting a STEP score that was like average, but it was like right below the cutoff for a lot of OB programs. I think it was like the cutoff is like 230 or 235 for a lot of programs. But you have like your personal statement, you have like your extracurricular activities, and those are things that you can really highlight. And you have your letters of recommendation. And if you do really well on your clinical rotations and you have strong mentors, like those are people that can really vouch for you and talk about, you as a person, talk about your clinical skills, talk about your qualities. And I think a lot of times, like your personal statement and your letters of rec can really be the thing that gets you that interview, not even your STEP score, but like those letters and your personal statement can get you that interview.
Wow. Again, thank you all so much for those amazing points. You all dropped some absolute gems. Again, thank you. So many different experiences. So moving forward, obviously, we mentioned COVID. That's the big gorilla in the room. You all had to obviously deal with that in a very critical time of your lives during this past year. You're applying and everything, interviews. So for you all, interviews looked very different than they have for anybody prior to this. So let's talk about that. Tell us, what were your experiences with interviews? What are some things you would recommend, some pointers you'd give others for interviewing virtually, and some just your experiences with interviews overall?
Also just wanted to add, like, application season in general, like how many programs you may, if you are comfortable with sharing how many programs you may have like applied to or what's recommended. Like, I don't even like know all the details. Like, let's think of yourself in that M3/M4 period of time when you're just about to apply. What's important to know?
I'll start. I think one thing that is important, at least one thing that was important for me, was like there's all this information that's coming at you all at once. You have the residency application process, but you're obviously still a medical student. So you still have all that stuff coming in from your medical school about things that you need to do, requirements you need to meet. So I'm a list maker. I literally write almost everything down. So I literally started with one master list. I kind of sat with my mentor and we just like wrote through like absolutely everything that needed to get done, from the ERAS, the experiences, the personal statement, the letters of recommendation, all of it, just to make sure that I kept it all straight and that I wasn't missing any deadlines. So that's part one. I think the second thing too is, as I sat down, and it's like even before thinking about, okay, how many programs I'm going to apply to, I needed to research the program. So that's like piece of advice number one, spend the time to research the programs. For me, it literally took me probably about like 2 days, which honestly was more than I thought. I was like, oh, I'll just take a couple hours and look through some programs. No, I totally underestimated that. It takes a lot longer than I thought it would. And one of the very first places that I started was Frida. And I believe that's through the AMA. I believe you maybe need an AMA account, you kind of sign in, you go to Frida. And what it does is at Frida, I went by state. So that's another thing too that I just want to throw out there for people is, before you even start doing that, think about one, yes, maybe you have a number one program, maybe you don't, right? But what is important to you? What is going to be most important for you to take into consideration during this process? I would sit and have that conversation with yourself and maybe a significant other or whoever's having an impact on you during this process, because you are going to get so much advice from all over the place. So like, it's very important to kind of make those determinations for yourself and then go from there. I may or may not have mentioned I am married. So my husband and I kind of sat down, and what was important to us is being someplace where our parents are, if we could, right? My husband was applying to fellowship during the same time period, so it kind of added a layer of complexity to our situation, but not really at the same time. Anyway, So I'm from Minnesota. He is from New Orleans, Louisiana, born and raised. His parents are still there. His family's there. My parents are Minnesota. My siblings are Minnesota. So, it started there. There are only 2 programs in Minnesota, whereas in Louisiana, there's like 7 or 8 or something like that. There's a good number. I take that back. I'm not exactly sure, but a good number, at least 5. So as I started with researching programs, I started putting those programs down first. With my husband applying, the fellowship application cycle had already started. So I started looking at programs at states in which he had also received interviews in already at that point in time. So Ohio, Mississippi, a whole bunch, a whole bunch of different states. I started looking at all of those programs as well. There's some programs that I would keep on my list, other programs that I would be like, no, I don't think this is the program for me. For us, they had a bunch of informational Zooms for programs. I found those to be particularly helpful, particularly the ones that were like resident run, because for me, I felt like you kind of got a little bit more of like a feel of the program. Though the ones with PDs and faculty, those were also helpful as well. Of course, just learning about the curriculum, the curricular part of the program. And those sometimes are hard to find. I highly recommend, especially if you're a 3rd year, go to Instagram and Twitter and follow. I believe they're just like virtual OBGYN. I believe that literally is their handle. Somebody please correct me if I'm wrong on that. I loved them. I followed them on Instagram. I thought it was absolutely excellent. They did a thing where they had each program do a day of featured stories, and they brought you around the hospital. They showed you the call rooms. They're like, oh, now we're eating lunch. And it sounds kind of boring, but in kind of the quick Instagram, story method, I found it to be very digestible and a great way to just get a small look into each of the programs. I know the CREOG website, it might be the APCO website, also had like under events, they would list any of the programs that would contact them and let them know like, hey, we have an informational Zoom. I highly recommend those because for me, it helped me rule in and also in some cases rule out programs. So get that list together. I believe I applied to like 74 programs. That was a lot. However, I will say the caveat to that is part of why I applied to so many was because I was unofficially couples matching and I had someone else to kind of consider. It was very important for my husband and I to try to be in the same state, not necessarily in the same program, but at least in the same state if we could. So I did apply to a good number of programs, but a large part of that was influenced by the fact that I had somebody else in my life to kind of consider as well. I think in hindsight, if I were applying alone, I don't think I would have applied to that many programs. This process is very expensive. I'm not sure if that question is coming up, but a talk that I recently gave to the 3rd years at my medical school was literally just on the finances of the applicant of 3rd year, of 4th year, and of the application process. It can get very, very expensive. Another caveat I'm going to throw in here for the people who choose to dual apply. I did not dual apply, but just know that if that is a decision you are going to make, that is it's very expensive. Let me just leave it at that. I had a few friends who dual applied and spent upwards of $2,000, $3,000 on simply just literally hitting submit to submit their applications. So that's not taking into account everything else. So I like to tell people that, so I have to throw that caveat in there. I'm not sure if any of my co-panelists here dual applied or could speak to that, but I did not. And then so broke down by state. I went, and the other big piece of advice I have is go to the website of the program. This was particularly important. I found out for this particular application cycle because a lot of programs, and I think this was, some people may have missed this, is because it was virtual, everything was online this year. I think maybe some programs thought that there'd be kind of a huge influx of applications. So on websites of some of the programs, it says, if you're applying to our program, please include a paragraph in your personal statement about why you would like to come to our program or why you are applying to this geographical area. And if you miss that or do not go to their website, it's there in black and white. So that is why, in part, one of my biggest recommendations is to go to the website. Also for DO students, go to the website. One thing you want to look under, potentially under prospective residents, where it is, where it's talking about applicants, go there and look and check on the COMLEX, the COMLEX USMLE thing. If they do say USMLE only, do not be afraid to email the program coordinator. Sometimes they just haven't updated their websites. But if that is what it is, trust me, they will respond and tell you that is what it is. So just always check on that, because you never want to rule yourself out of programs or apply to programs that you don't necessarily quote unquote qualify just because you didn't take step 1 or step 2. So another big piece of advice that I have. I know we were talking about interviews. All of our interviews were virtual, at least in my general understanding, all of mine were. I thankfully had the opportunity to interview at a good number of programs. I would say the virtual interview was tough because, it was so funny. We got this email from our dean at our school, and it was like, hey, on your interview days, make sure you go back to your rotation after your interview, in the morning. I think, and this was way earlier on before the process actually started. I think one thing they failed to account for is the interview day was still very literally an interview day. Depending on the time zone of the program I was interviewing at, sometimes I literally started at 6:25 in the morning, 6:30 in the morning. And most of my interview days literally went a good 5, 6, 7 hours. And it was a lot. I was very surprised at how exhausting it was. And I think, when you have just a Zoom setting, a lot of mine were via Zoom or via Thalamus, which wasn't my favorite, but whatever, that's not the point. You're on kind of all the time. You'll sometimes they'll tell you please keep your camera on even when you're in the waiting room or when you're between interviews. So you're very, very literally on all the time. It's very hard to do other things like check email or text. I appreciated the programs that were go ahead and shut your camera off, go to the bathroom, do what you need to do. I really appreciated that. But the days are really, they were still, at least for me in the program, in my experience, they're still full interview days. So that's something to keep in mind as well. I had a bunch of lighting set up. I literally just went on Amazon. I didn't get any super fancy ring light. My ring light was $15. I will say I got 3 of them and put them on the 3, 1 in front of me and 2 on the sides. I just found that to be helpful, unlike my lighting today, which isn't as great. But I just found that to be helpful and just something I didn't have to worry about, though. Pro tip, it did get really hot. So if you do use a lot of lights, just got to keep that in mind. And I could talk about the interviews very specifically, but I feel like I've already been talking for a pretty long period of time. A couple of last minute things is if you can practice, SNMA set up this great opportunity to be able to connect with somebody who would give you a practice interview. My person had just started on faculty at Northwestern and on OBGYN faculty there. And we have just a 2-hour kind of period of time where she interviewed me. She gave me feedback on my responses, and not even just the responses, but little things like I tend to talk with my hands and swivel in my chair. Sometimes when I was talking, she was like, okay, so either get a chair that doesn't swivel or don't swivel, or try to be conscious of swiveling in your chair. So little, that's one minor example, but something I didn't even realize I was doing until I did that practice interview. So, I hope that's something SNMA continues to do, because definitely take advantage of that opportunity if you can. Not only did I have that opportunity, but then I also met a faculty member at Northwestern OBGYN. So that was great as well. My questions, I got kind of the full gamut of questions. I definitely got some illegal questions as well. For those of you who are not aware, a legal question, in theory, you shouldn't get questions about your marital status, your age. Family planning is another one. You shouldn't get questions about are you planning on having children, things like that. I kind of expected that. I feel like in some regards, it just kind of comes with the territory. It is what it is, though. Just kind of, it is what it is. And if you have any sort of flaw, quote unquote flaw or quote unquote red flag on your application, rehearse that ahead of time just in case it comes up, because you want to, if it is brought up, you don't want to be stammering through your response. And I'm very big on, just acknowledge that it's there, acknowledge that it happened, and try not to be too rehearsed, of course, but just kind of confront it, talk about it if you have to talk about it. And, but definitely rehearse that ahead of time, so you're not thrown off by the question or, kind of thrown off your beat there. So yeah, I will kind of end there with that.
So I guess just to follow, as far as virtual interviews go, it is virtual and it seems like it's completely different, but there are still some aspects of it to consider that are the same. So have your questions that you want to ask program directors and people that are interviewing. I had them, written down, but I also did keep a file on my computer. And again, practicing is a good thing. And there are little things that you don't realize that you do on camera. So I had 2 mock interviews and they kind of gave me feedback on that stuff. And one piece of advice that I got that was really helpful was on near the webcam, I put a little sticky note thing that said, look here, so that I could actually look at the camera, because we have the tendency to look at the screen. We want to look at the person that's talking to to us, especially when we're talking, but you should be looking at your camera. And that was a piece of advice that was given to me even on an interview day. One of my interviews was just like, oh, I know it's not a big deal, but make sure you're looking at your camera, and, turn off your notifications and things so things are not dinging and popping up. Those are some of the general pieces of advice that I got that I thought were kind of helpful. And then as far as interviews go, I absolutely 100% agree that you have to do your research. So I actually started doing my research in like November. And the reason why November of third year, and the reason why I did that was because I looked at, there was like 200 and something OBGYN programs. There was no way that I was going to go through all those programs. So I would do like 5 a day or something, because all that information starts to jumble in your head. I did an Excel sheet. And so I would put, first and foremost, I looked at programs realistically, where would I want to live, things that were important to me. I have a fiance, so like considering his work employment, and then like being close to an airport because we like to travel, things of that stuff that mattered to me. And then I would make an Excel sheet, and then I would put in information like if they've ever taken DOs before, if they hadn't, if they were doing audition rotations, when to submit VSAS application, any information, pros and cons, things that were important to me about the program. I would just kind of make notes. I had everything on a spreadsheet. And I did that. And so originally, I think I had like over 100 programs on my list to start with. And then I went back and really narrowed down programs like, okay, which programs had never taken a DO or weren't DO friendly, or, wanted something. And then I eliminated those programs. And then I had my mentors look at my programs list. Ultimately, when I met with one of my mentors, he told me that I should be applying to about 50 to 75 programs as a DO applicant. And in hindsight, I think that he was probably right, and I should have done that, but I wanted to make sure that I had a good mix of academic and community programs. I wanted to make sure that I applied to a good set of programs, especially because of the track record at my school. I felt like OBGYN was a specialty where we get at least over 10 people apply and only like 3 or so match in the previous years. And so I felt like I wanted to optimize my chances of matching. So I ended up applying to about 93 programs in total, and it is very expensive. In hindsight, I probably could have applied to like the recommended 40, like they said, but being a DO applicant, I felt like I needed to do what was best for me to ensure that I would successfully match. There was something else I wanted to tell you guys. So interview day, lighting, you can get the ring lights, and make sure you have something. Oh, this is what I want to tell you guys. Make sure that like for interview days, and most program coordinators are really good about telling you to kind of sign down a few minutes early, but definitely make sure you do, because I've had an interview where I had technical issues and I couldn't get in. And so it seemed like I was joining in a lot later, and it was just a technical thing. So try to get up a few minutes early so that you can make sure everything's working. Your internet's not, make sure you're in a reliable space where if something happens, and have your phone close by so that if something happens, because there was an interview day where everything was not working. So we ended up doing phone interviews. So just be prepared and be flexible. And just as much as, this is an interview for you, it's an interview for them, and they understand. And I didn't find any programs that were like, oh, you showed up late or this happened, and like held it against me. It didn't seem that way. They're going through this this year they were going through the same process that we were. Nobody knew what to expect. So we all had grace and mercy for each other. And so just don't be hard on yourself, but try to be as prepared as you can be.
Yeah, so for me, I would say I personally found the virtual application process to be a blessing, just because first of all, it saved me a lot of money on traveling. And then second of all, I found scheduling interviews to be very stressful. So I thought to myself, I don't know how I would do this if I actually had to fly to these places and coordinate, being excused from rotations and all of that. So I actually found it to be a huge blessing for me. So in terms of building my program list, I kind of started that I would say early on, around February of my third year. And I really was just kind of just looking through programs, going through their websites. I was, born and raised in Los Angeles, and I've never left California. And so I was very open to leaving California. So I was really looking at programs the Northeast, and then the Southeast because I was really attracted to living in those regions of the country. And then when COVID hit, I got really nervous because I don't know if anyone watching is from California, but California is like kind of notorious for, like, people know that California residents don't want to leave California. So I knew that, like, okay, I'm not going to be able to do an away rotation. So I don't know how I'm going to express to these programs that, like, yeah, I'm willing to leave California and come to your program. So I actually, around May, there were a couple programs that I knew that I was really interested in. And I ended up emailing the program directors at those programs and just expressing my interest through email. And I found that to be really helpful. Actually, the program I matched at UT Houston was my top choice program. And back in May, I emailed the PD just to express my interest. And I think that I feel like if I hadn't done that, she may have not known to look for my application. And so I feel like, if you're able to do that, particularly for those of you that are California residents, like if you're able to do that, to reach out to the program directors at programs that are out of state, like I definitely recommend that, just to put your name out there. So that way they know like who you are, know that you're interested, and then know, like, to look out for you when applications come in. And I would definitely echo everything that was said about, going to, kind of like those virtual webinars that programs host. I thought that was so helpful for me just to learn about the program. And again, especially those ones that are resident run, it really helped me to get to know the residents and I guess like kind of like the vibe of the program. And then also, Instagram and Twitter, I believe, was like really big this past year. I followed like all of the programs on Instagram that I was applying to. And that was really helpful for me just to get to know, like, what the residents are like and, see, like, do they hang out together? I think the programs that post a lot on Instagram, that was really helpful for me to see, like, kind of what was the vibe, the general vibe of the residents at the program. And then, I would say in terms of just like virtual interviewing, I got a ring light, which was super helpful. I know a lot of people like had plants in their background. I never really got the plant hype, so I didn't get one. But I had like artwork in my background. So just to, spice up my background. I know some people had notes on their screen that they referenced during their interview. I did that in the beginning, and then I realized, like, I wear glasses, so I realized like people might be able to see my screen through my glasses, so I stopped doing that. And you'll realize that, like, as the interview season goes on, it actually gets easier for you to answer questions. So it really wasn't necessary for me to have any notes on the screen. For me, I ended up applying to 40 programs. So I kept to that cap that they gave us. I was a little nervous about that just because I didn't feel like my application was that strong numbers wise. But after talking to mentors and really getting advice on how to highlight other aspects of my application, like my personal statement, and then making sure that I got really strong letters of recommendation, I felt more comfortable sticking to that 40 program rule. And I ended up getting a good number of interviews. And I think that was because I really took the time to build a program list that I felt like, matched me and kind of my goals for residency. And so I felt like I was really applying to programs that, like, I knew I wanted to, or I could see myself ending up at. Particularly for me, I knew that I wanted to be at a program that was diverse and that diversity was important to them. For a lot of the programs, I kind of like looked through the resident roster and I kind of counted like how many URM residents were at the program, and I read through the program just to kind of see, what kind of initiatives that they were doing diversity wise. In addition to that, I wanted to be at in a region of the country that was really diverse. And so I applied to programs in big cities like Houston, Dallas, Atlanta, Chicago, Philly. And so, yeah, I think that also doing that and kind of crafting my program list that way, I think really helped me feel comfortable applying to 40 programs. Trying to think what other advice. I would say also a lot of people did recommend writing thank you notes after interviews. And I would just say, you know, in the beginning, I tried to write thank you emails to every single interviewer. I found that to be very tiring. And so I would just recommend, you know, if you want to send a thank you note, if you want to express your interest to a program after an interview, first of all, make sure that you can send a thank you note, because some programs will be very specific about the fact that they don't want any correspondence after the interview. So if you send an email, that'll look like you can't follow instructions. But if they do allow thank you notes, you know, I would just recommend sending them to the programs that you're really interested in, and just sending them to like 1 or 2 interviewers that you actually had a connection with. And I think that if you do that and maybe reference something in your email about like something specific you guys talked about in your conversation, I think it'll show that you were really engaged in the interview, and I think it'll help you stand out. But I don't think it's necessary to send a thank you note to, you know, every single program.
I had one quick thing that I wanted to add to everything that was said. So one thing that I did want to also emphasize is I know pre-COVID, we were always told, like, you know, try to schedule your top programs not as your first or your last, because it can get tiring. And I feel like that holds true with virtual interviews too. So, you know, that first interview is going to be the most nerve-wracking. You might make some mistakes. You might beat yourself up about it. And then the ones towards the end, you can get Zoom fatigue. And, you know, I ended up canceling interviews. So that's one thing to be mindful of. And then the other thing that I want to emphasize is going back to the program research, program websites, because some of the programs did a good job at like listing their interview dates. And so one thing for this COVID cycle was programs did anticipate like over application and like hoarding of interviews. So a lot of programs scheduled their interviews on the same day. So you literally had to choose which program you truly wanted to interview at. So kind of being, and I think, the OBGYN spreadsheet did a pretty good job at kind of like creating a document that showed which programs are interviewing on which days. So we kind of had a little foreknowledge of which programs when they were sending out interviews, so that you could make an informed decision. But I think that's something that might be true for the next cycle. Like I anticipate programs will probably keep that, so where you have multiple programs interviewing on the same days, so that candidates aren't like interviewing at all the programs. So you sometimes have to be selective and have to choose one program over the other for interview dates. So be mindful of that.
Thank you guys all for like the tips and everything. It's definitely like, first of all, let's just acknowledge that we matched into residency in a pandemic. Yeah, I know, like round of applause, literally. Just, I know, because we're getting a little like tight on time, just wanted to really touch on really quickly, because this was something that was important to me, and Buki and I talked about this earlier. What are you guys doing, like costs of like applying? I think we've already kind of touched on that, but let's talk about the cost and the things that you're doing right now, like after you've matched and like going into residency, like the move, the paperwork that's involved. Like, let's just touch on that really quickly, and then we'll kind of like end the session. But just really wanted to touch on that, because that's something that no one really talks about.
So I can start with this. So there's a lot of onboarding paperwork, and specifically at my program, we have like this system where it kind of gives you like a checklist and stuff. And so when you complete stuff, they kind of tell you, hey, you've completed this and stuff. And I found that to be helpful. One thing that I found to be most helpful for me is to try to complete a task, like try to do something here and there. So like I might do one set of onboarding paperwork today and then give myself a break for the rest of the day and then look at something tomorrow. Like I space it out, making sure that I meet all deadlines, because sometimes it can be overwhelming and you literally have to like go through these documents and make sure you're filling them out correctly so that they can get accepted. Some programs will require you to do like your drug screening and like certifications, ACLS and all that. So just always like not being afraid to ask questions, because I'm sure I was like, my program coordinator is going to be sick of me emailing her every time she sends me an email, but I always need clarification to make sure I'm getting it done right. So don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it. In addition, me and my fiance decided to buy a house. So we're getting ready to close on a house. And so that's been a lot of work. And then we are packing. So same thing with packing is we pack a box or two a day. We don't try to do too much at one time because it can seem overwhelming. And so we have about 2 weeks left and we have maybe about 1/3 of the place packed up. It's a lot of money. We had to travel to Minnesota to go like look at the house before closing. You will spend a lot of money getting your certifications if your program doesn't cover it. You will have to pay first month's rent, deposits and stuff for housing. You will need to consider getting movers or renting a U-Haul truck or getting a pod. So do your research, compare, try to find savings, tell them you're a student, always ask for a discount. So we went furniture shopping and I was like, hey, I'm going to be working at this place. Do you guys have a discount? And they sure enough did, and it saved us a lot of money. But I do truly think that the transition to residency is something that a lot of people don't talk about, and it is very expensive. So start considering that like your last disbursement may be the only money that you get. So you want to make sure that you're budgeting and you're like saving that money for things that you need to get done. My fiance, is fully employed and stuff. And so we did, take a vacation. It was already planned before all of this. It was postponed from December, but I just got back from Hawaii, a 10-day Hawaii trip yesterday. And so do the things that you enjoy, take a vacation if you can afford it. If you can't, ask your family and friends if they want to fund and sponsor it, and really just take the time. Like, remember that this is the last period of time that you get to truly kind of relax before you start these 80-hour crazy work weeks. So just make sure that you're not feeling overwhelmed and that you can go into residency feeling refreshed.
Just to piggyback off that, which Claire, yes, girl, you covered all the big things. And as you were talking, I was like, oh, yeah. Also, we need to touch base about the furniture places you got. I agree with all of that. Karen, I'll let you go. Sorry, excuse me. I need to cough really quick.
Oh, no worries. I mean, I just, I agree with everything that Claire said. I don't really have much to add. I think that I would definitely agree that, I think it's the spring semester where you get your last set of loans. And so for me, I tried to budget, for that January disbursement, because I knew that whatever I was going to get in my loans in January would have to like cover me until my first paycheck in July. And so I tried to budget for that, like budgeting for a move and then just transitioning to living potentially out of state. And then I would say, that onboarding paperwork is very stressful. And just having to do all the logistical stuff of getting certifications and drug screenings and things like that. So I would definitely agree with Claire to try and do a little bit at a time. Don't stress yourself out because, this is you don't need to be stressed out before residency. You have the next 4 years to be as stressed as you want. So you don't need to do that now. Really try and do things a little bit every day. And then, I personally can't afford a trip, but for me, it was really important that, I moved back home because I knew that I'd be moving away from home. And so for this past month, I've been staying with my parents. And so, if you can't afford a trip, if you can afford a trip, that's great. If you can't, I'd recommend spending lots of time with your family and friends, especially because you're not going to see much of them during residency. And yeah, I'll let Bucky take it over.
Yeah, sorry about that, everyone. So I have literally agreed with all of that. I actually did crowdfund / source a trip from my parents and siblings who were nice enough to kind of contribute to help me be able to go to, I went to Punta Cana with a bunch of medical students, and it was fun. It was only, I shouldn't say only, it was vacation nonetheless, but it was 4 days. So it was a quick trip, but very fun. And it was very nice because I definitely really relaxed to the fullest. I ignored my email, my onboarding, all that stuff. And, here we are, just got back a few days ago, and, a lot of stuff was piled up, but it was worth it. So I highly recommend, if you are able to figure it out in any way, shape, or form, or sacrifice in any way, shape, or form, definitely recommend it. One thing I'm doing, and one of my really good friends who also graduated with me is doing, is I'm actually working right now at a hospital. At the hospital I did my rotations at, they were looking for very specifically recently graduated medical students who wanted to make some money before they started residency. And basically, we just work with the hospital, the inpatient hospital medicine teams, to communicate between the physician and the patient's family. So we call the patient families and say, hey, your loved one had an EEG today. They're going to be seen by IR later today, that type of thing. It's kind of nice. It's been a very nice, and I didn't even realize how necessary and how needed additional income. I've mentioned my husband a few times, but he is a resident, and we all know how much residents make. So it's not, unfortunately, we're not quite in a position where I can fully lean on him financially quite yet anyways. So if you are able to do that, I will say, in a perfect world, I much rather would have been doing nothing other than having to wake up and do onboarding all day. Though this hasn't been bad at all. I like the hospital. I really like the doctors and the teams and the people that I work with. So it's not the worst thing in the world. I have tons of downtime, but just something to consider if you're thinking about going that job route. Another friend of mine actually signed up to be one of the phone call operators for the COVID vaccine hotlines in the state of New Jersey. So they get paid like $20 an hour to answer to field calls about COVID vaccine, where to go, that type of thing. Also kind of pretty easy, quote unquote, right? Easy work. So things to consider, ways to potentially get additional income. I, again, just go sign all of the things Claire brought up that I was, I guess maybe if I had really sat and thought about it, I maybe could have thought of some of these things, but I think, you're so focused on match that that is your number one goal that I definitely didn't put. I didn't really think about all of the finances of this part. I think another big thing that has come up for me is your medical license. It does cost to, depending on the state that you're applying for, or a trainee license, that is another cost. I remember getting an email like, you have to pay this much money. I was like, oh, great. In some circumstances or instances, you may or may not have to pay to be recertified in ACLS. That's another one. Our school was going to charge us $125, but they thankfully ended up deciding to cover that cost for the students who chose to do it. But that was, yet another added kind of cost that initially came up. I think too, if you are not in the same place that your medical school is, another cost that I did not think about was having to get back to your medical school for graduation. Ours was optional. I did choose to go, more so for my parents, if I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, but they appreciated it and we were there. But that is flights, that was hotel. For us, that's rental car, because my medical school is pretty far from the airport that like an Uber won't take you there. So just other kind of quote unquote little things, but also sometimes in the moment they feel like very big things, because it's just like you just see the money like just dwindling. If you are so blessed to have somebody like a parent or family or whomever to support, you're very blessed in that aspect. Don't be afraid to ask. I just asked my parents for money for the first time in like years the other day, because I was like, Dad, can you please give me some money? And of course he was like, yes, like it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't a problem. But it's just don't be afraid to reach out and ask. So I think the finances of it all, plus the onboarding, which is that can kind of be a lot, especially if there are things that like you can't really control. Like right now, I'm still waiting to get my diploma to upload that so they can verify my status, but I'm still, that's still dependent on the school to really, it's a whole thing. One other thing I want to put out there as well is your financial aid, not just the formal exiting counseling online. If you have financial aid through like FAFSA.gov or studentaid.gov, you have the online one, but our school made us have a Doctors Without Quarters meeting. And in that they talk through all the things, all of your different repayment strategies. And some of that sometimes just requires you to be very attentive to your loan statuses when they switch over from in school to the grace period, all of that. So there's just like so much going on, a lot to do, a lot to balance. Once again, I recommend getting a good old planner and a good old list, because it will be very, very long and there'll be lots of things to really kind of stay on top of. And as you mentioned, Lily, it's something that I had really hoped to, that somebody before had mentioned, like, girl, heads up, you know, once you match, we're going to celebrate for a good 2-3 days, and then we're going to really get down to business, because life comes at you and it comes at you fast.
Yes, yes, yes. I just wanted to thank you guys all for like sharing your experiences. It's a good chunk of time of your day, so I'm really, really appreciative. Hopefully the audience is also very appreciative as well. I wanted to give you guys a space because we're going to close up right now. If there's like, you know, like a way for people to contact you, Instagram, anything that you got going on for yourself that you would like to pub, we're going to use the space for that right now.
I will just say I'm still trying to figure out exactly like how I want to use my Instagram and social media, but I'm at Bookie123 on Instagram and Twitter. You can always follow me there, my musings about life. And I hope to one day in the future go into academic medicine. And I tell people I want to be a dean of a medical school one day. So on Twitter especially, I do a lot of kind of just conversations / thoughts on medical education and first and second year of medical school. And also I do a lot of health policy work as well. I'm very big on that. I currently sit on one of the AMA governing councils. I definitely recommend checking out the AMA if you're a medical student. I've enjoyed my leadership involvement there, and I thought that's been very helpful. And of course, I have to shout out SNMA. I spent 2 years on the National Board of SNMA. SNMA in so many different ways literally was such a great additive to my medical school education. I met a lot of my really good friends there who I'm still friends with to this day, and they just have tons of resources that are really helpful. And also I have to end with always remember you are your own best advocate, and nobody will advocate for you better than you will advocate for yourself. But that's all for me.
Yeah, so for me, you can find me on Instagram. My Instagram name is at Naija Doctor, so NAIJADOCTOR. And I just wanted to say thank you for just giving us this opportunity to, you know, kind of just share our journeys and our experiences. This is actually my first time doing something like this. So I was very nervous, but you guys did a very good job of, you know, making me feel very comfortable. So thank you for that. And yeah, you know, I think, you know, I think this upcoming application year is going to be very strange because we're kind of transitioning from like that COVID time to maybe back to normal. So I'm not quite sure what the application cycle is going to look like, but I'm very open to, you know, DMs if anyone has any questions. I'm very, you know, passionate about the whole, like, if you've been on the West Coast the whole time, like branch out. So if you have any questions about that, like you can definitely hit me up for that and how, you know, I was kind of able to network and match out of state. So yeah, that's all for me.
Yeah, just to echo what everybody said, thank you for this opportunity. You can follow me on Twitter in my full name, Claire Dorcent, DORCENT. And then on Instagram, it's at Claire Dorcent 21. And I'm more than willing to answer questions via DM, and we can, you know, further exchange information, email, phone number, whatever it is. You know, application season is coming up, and I don't think you can ever have you know, enough people in your corner. So if you have questions, if you need somebody to read a personal statement, things like that, like reach out, because even if I can't do it during this busy season, I can find somebody who can. And so just always reach out. And then the biggest piece of advice that I want to give everyone is to trust yourself. You've made it this far. You deserve everything that's about to happen to you. So believe in yourself. And even if you don't believe in yourself, surround yourself with those that do, so that you can make it, and you will survive this process and you'll get through it. And at the end of the day, you'll be able to celebrate, and then you'll be on this panel next year giving advice to other people. So just keep at it. And again, listening ear, anything you guys need, please feel free to reach out.
Thank you guys times a million. Like seriously, I love having these sessions, like just because of the inspiration, and like I'm just so proud of y'all. Anyway, thank you guys all for watching. We'll put the contact information of our wonderful panelists in the description. Like, comment, subscribe as usual, and we'll also have some more sessions coming up. So we're gonna log out right now. Bye guys.